Welcome back. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about module development. Just come out of a week of external examining. One of the things that I'm always led to with external examining is after I've done the first year with a university, and I'm almost certain that most teams do a really, really good job anyway. But once you've been in, you've made sure that everything's going well with the degree. One of the things is to try and make sure that I offer some sort of advice, encouragement around developing modules in a variety of ways. Usually those ways offer somewhat of a different take to the way that people tend to think about module development when they go on internal courses within the university, whether that's the more formal qualifications or the shorter training days. So hopefully today we'll add some sort of value to that process that people are on. I'm doing this in the summer at the end of the COVID lockdown. Hopefully staff have now finished their marking and are starting to think about getting some research done, but also module development. So a bunch of these ideas might be useful. Hopefully they are. If they are, please let me know. If they're not, also let me know. It'd be good to hear back from people as to if they're getting anything out of these sort of videos. So let me just set this up with a few points, and then I will discuss a few different areas around module development. So the first 4 points are just kind of general things, just as context. And these are based on my own experience over a decade or so of doing teaching, of seeing colleagues do really good teaching, and also colleagues who have struggled in a variety of ways. And the number one, which amazes me still to this day when I still see it, is that colleagues don't pick the low-hanging fruit. The really obvious things that we know will result in students enjoying the experience with them and doing well, a lot of colleagues miss. It's always said at these training days, but turning up on time is one of the main things. So the students aren't sat there for even just a couple of minutes, just be early. Another real good one, which I think we seem to have lost for some reason, connected to digital technologies, is communication with students. I tend to spend far less time on my module online page communicating and more time giving them a guaranteed way they're going to hear from me, which is a weekly email. Usually comes at the same time every week. The students can look at that and know exactly what's ahead of them. Sort of communication. So low-hanging fruit. One of the best ways to ensure you are picking the low-hanging fruit on your module is to get one of your colleagues, especially someone who has a knowledge of the students and knowledge of the degree, just to come and watch you teach, watch what you do, discuss how things are happening. Make sure you do that. Second one, follow internal pedagogy in terms of the ideas of how they outline good practice, what the university recommends that you have to deliver, how you have to deliver it, but don't be a slave to it. One of the problems with this top-down approach to universities' policies around pedagogy is that they are literally for the whole university and don't necessarily suit individual degrees, individual cohorts. One of the things also to consider when you're going onto these internal courses, and this is a comment which has got me in trouble in the past by accident. I said this once when I was with a friend walking down the stairs as they were on their way to an internal pedagogy course. It's quite mean. The phrase I said was, those who can do, those who can't teach, those who can't teach, try to teach others to teach. It's a bit mean, it's overly reductive. It certainly is wrong in many cases, but in my experience, there's also elements, kernels of truth to it. I've been on teaching days where the people who've delivered the days have had slides packed with information which can't be digested, have not given the appropriate amount of rest in between sessions, have not given the class chance to discuss things with each other. I've seen people who are in charge of pedagogy within a department mumbling to the floor as they're lecturing to a lecture theatre full of 100 people. So we just have to be somewhat careful of some of the advice that we get from these from these internal classes that we have. So then that opens us up to something else. If you have somebody in your department who is good at delivering classes, who does get a good response from the students, go and see what they do. They might not deliver anything to do with pedagogy. They might not even know how they're doing it. But in just watching people who are good in front of a class and good in front of a room, who the students like, it's very easy to find some really good information from that rather than some of the more formal stuff. Second thing, and these next 2 points are really important for everything else that I'm going to say in the rest of the video, is one is it's important to try and get a read on your students. Now, I'm lucky enough to teach sports students. My previous career before academia was a sports coach. So I have years now. I started sports coaching when I was 16. I'll date myself, so that's, 24 years. Yeah. Of being involved in some form of teaching. And one of the things with the sports students is that sport, as some of you may know, is quite a conservative institution. Coach says jump, you say how high. There's obviously lots of problems with that, but it does lead to our students being very receptive to instructions, and largely as a cohort, not individually obviously, but in a general sense, our students are very willing to listen to us, especially when they recognize that the person who's teaching them is, one, knowledgeable, and two, got their best interests at heart. I think that's the case for most students, but to different degrees. And it's very important. I've heard very, very different situations within social science degrees, for example, where the students are taught and come in to those degrees thinking about challenging society's status quo. So if you spend a lot of time encouraging your students to think differently about the social world, it shouldn't be a surprise when they challenge authority, which is, something that we probably want to look for in our students. But it's important. My point is that it's important to get a read on your students, understand who they are, what they're like as a group, and be able to kind of understand how your behaviors reflect on that. Then the second thing is to try and get a read on yourself. What is it that you do really well? And what is it that you struggle with? So again, this underpins all of the stuff that I'm going to talk about as I go through. There's certain things that I do in a classroom, which I know my colleagues don't do and can't do, and vice versa, that I can get away with for a variety of reasons, and I use in a positive way and get good responses from students, and other colleagues don't. And a good example of this is to think about the way in which this isn't just my anecdotal understanding of this. This is borne out within research on the sociology of people going and teaching. In that, if I am to be in front of a classroom and someone starts chatting amongst themselves and I pull them up on it, might be seen as a disciplinarian, as forceful, as confident. Whereas a female colleague, those behaviours may well be interpreted very, very differently. It's one of the uneven and unfair issues that we live within in terms of teaching, is the reception of male and female colleagues differently. Now, factor into that age, race, ability, sexuality, and all of those factors shape the way that students may, quite sometimes unfairly, respond to the way that you do things. So it's something really to be aware of. Play to your strengths, be aware of your weaknesses. And that, again, going back to what I said earlier, it might require you having to have a colleague come in and watch you teach and say, yes, this was good, be careful of that because of these interpretations, especially if you've got a senior colleague who could come and do that. I have a colleague at work who gave me some fantastic information recently about things that I was doing, and I just slipped into some kind of quite lazy habits because I've been doing this for so long. It just made me think, okay, hold on, need to get a grip of that again. So be aware of your strengths, play to them as much as possible. But be aware of your weaknesses and try and manage and mitigate them. Okay, so given that, here's a few points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 broad points that I'm going to go through around module development. Oat milk, new for me. Number one, and this is around delivery as well as the production and development, this point especially. Internal consistency. Does the module from start to finish have an internal consistency? Does week one align with the final week? Is it a nice bow at the end of it? Does everything tie up, or different threads when you pull on them, do they all align together in the assessment, in the delivery, in the content? Does it all make sense? Can you explain the story of that module in a relatively simple way? It's really important to think about that. Some ways that can be done, as I've already said, the start to the finish. Can you set up in the first week what's going to be expected at the end? And are the students after that first week going to be able to go, yeah, I see this module, I already understand it? If they can't do that, there's a fundamental problem straight away. If you can't do that, there's an even more of a problem. It needs to be very, very clear how this all aligns. Now, you can different separate parts to it, of course, but there needs to be that clear coherence throughout the whole thing. One way to think about this is to always try and have echoes. Once you've set things up at the beginning, echo back to what you said at that time. Echo back 4 weeks in. Remember I said this, remember I talked about this. And then towards the end, maybe when you get in your module feedback forms, echo back to how this was set up. The students won't remember, so you have to echo back to those things to be able to kind of pull them along and see the internal consistency. It's one thing to set it out at the beginning, it's another thing to make people aware that that's happening. One thing to do to highlight that again is to have transitions between each section. Ideally, these will be conceptual transitions, things where things clearly flow. Right, we've gone from this topic, obviously we're going to this topic next. We've done gender this week, we're going to do racism next week because they're both about inequality. A simple way. Those sort of transitions then need to again be outlined quite clearly. The conceptual links between them can be useful. We talked about this concept last week in terms of this academic topic, and now we're going to talk about this concept again, but with a different lens, a different academic topic to understand it. So there's a nice transition which people like. Within that, we can then think about building blocks, different building blocks which, when pulled together midway or 3/4 of the way through the module, the students can see how the different academic building blocks can be slotted together to build an essay, a portfolio, or help them deliver good exam essays or answer exam questions. So academic building blocks. I like to use a number when I'm teaching, taken from social theory, social ideas around maybe labeling, and start with something like that, build into another idea which flows on from that. Rather than going, here's theory one, here's theory two, take the concepts out of them and then align them together. Then you show the students how, okay, this person's been labeled, now we're going to align that with something to do with race. Okay, how do those two ideas fit? And that can help the students really understand things. So internal consistency, really important. The next one, a perennial problem for many staff, is engagement. Now, even staff who have really good relationship with students, have really good high satisfaction, still see a drop of engagement. And people always ask questions around this. Well, one, you have to accept an element of disengagement. It is what it is. Two, I always encourage people not to kind of think of this as some sort of issue with the students, because what can you do about the students? Students sometimes don't attend. It is what it is. But we can always attend, and we can always do better ourselves. This is a kind of positive way of thinking about this sort of thing. Is, yeah, students don't attend, students don't listen, but what am I going to do about that? How am I going to manage that? So the first thing is to try and make the students want to come. It seems like a very simple statement, but a lot of staff just accept that students don't want to come to their classes. I've never understood that. It seems to me to be very odd. I love the stuff that I teach, and I know that I can help the students find that love, even if they don't have it initially. So make the students want to come to your class. So here's some ideas as how to do that. One, it should be fun. They should be relaxed. I remember a colleague of mine on day one, week one, getting up in the students' faces about, this is what you've got to do. You must do this. We expect this. And I said afterwards, just calm down a little bit. Just relax. Let the students know that they're here to enjoy themselves and learn at the same time, instead of turning them off straight away. So fun and relaxed. If you're not a fun and relaxed person, don't drink too much coffee, do some meditation, go into class and try and be relaxed. Try and make it fun. Yes, you want to start on time, but don't be mean if someone comes in late. Just be relaxed about it. It's fine. How can you make it fun? Well, get a read on the students. Do they want to watch something? Do they want to watch something early on in the class to let them relax? Do they want to watch a video? Let them do it. Then you can maybe go into some academic ideas about that thing that they've watched. Just get a read on the students. What do they think is fun? Do they need some time to chat together? Are you teaching them at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning when they've not seen each other for a few days? Well, let them chat for a little bit. Within the sessions, they should always learn something. Seems a daft one. We're there to teach them, but they should always learn something. And sometimes students aren't aware what they've learned. So it's really important to make them aware what they've learned. Today we have done this. You have learned this stuff. There should be, ideally, in each session, a penny drop moment. Oh, I never thought of it like that. So try and think, where are you inspiring the students at some point within that module to think differently, think creatively, to think about the world differently? This doesn't have to be just nailed onto your subject. You can broaden it out a little bit. Okay, what does this idea that I've just talked to you about in terms of X academic topic I'm trying to talk to you about mean for your own life? Those sort of lessons. Always talk about the assessment. A lot of staff leave this till the end. If you always talk about something connected to the assessment, either how what you've taught them today goes into the assessment, or how, here's the lecture finished, and now we're going to talk about what a good essay is. If there's always something on the assessment, you'll find that students who are perhaps not engaged with the topic area will still be interested in coming to get that knowledge. Always something about the assessment, even if it's 20 minutes, even if it's with third years, and I still do this with third years, going over what referencing is again 1 week, just to guarantee, one, that they've got something about the assessment, and two, that they can do references, because still you'll get some that won't. Then this is an odd one. This is something that I do, and I think sometimes isn't welcomed too much by students, and you have to be very wary of doing this in terms of offering unsolicited advice. But most of us are older than most of our students. I have found myself recently realizing that I've lived a life twice as long as my students. So I have some value to offer to them away from university life. So I often try, we'll have a time at the end of the session where they can ask open questions, where we can discuss life more broadly. It might be politics or whatever. You do have to have a good relationship with the students to do this. They have to be interested in you and what you do and what your thoughts are about things, not just about the academic topic. But you can give them life lessons about employability, about how to use the degree, about what's going to be required of them when they leave university in terms of getting a job and using the degree to leverage jobs and interviews. Life lessons you've learned, funny stories that you've got to be able to tell them at the end. Again, this goes back to my first point about playing to your strengths and making sure you get a read on your students. You can see this falling flat for many people, but something to consider. Try it out. See if you can add some value to the students' time with you that's beyond just the learning and teaching and the assessment. See if you can give them some extra. This sort of thing I've found really useful, enhancing engagement in terms of students wanting to come and just to be able to spend time with me and learn some stuff about the topic, but also more broadly. Next one, do more or better with less. Now, we have to be careful with this one. We don't want to do ourselves out of jobs, and it's not about that. This is not a top-down management job of get paid less, do more work. Certainly not that. But the phrase, I think, is quite useful. So do more or better with less. So one, less from you, more from them. Often I hear staff saying, I've got to teach this, I've got to teach that. How am I going to deliver this? How am I going to deliver that? And I often say, just don't deliver it. The thing that you think is important, there's a good chance it's not necessarily important to the students or their future careers. Instead, think, what do they need? What do I really think that they've got to get? And how can I do that better over a longer period of time? Instead of trying to ram in 50 slides from PowerPoint, talk about 2 different academic ideas, make a bridge between them, give them a chance to discuss it, give them a task, and then revisit it next week. Something nice and simple. You don't have to give them a million papers, don't have to show a million different examples, talk about a million studies. Just give them something nice and simple to get their heads around. Let them think about it, return to it, maybe return to it in the second half of the module. It's another way to think about it. Do better with less, do more or better with less. Less content in more detail. Yeah, don't be afraid to repeat stuff. Don't be afraid to repeat your ideas. The stuff that you know so well, often the students really struggle to grasp. And some of them will be quite happy learning it again. When the students that are more advanced, you can say to them, okay, if you think you've got this, I want you to take a lead in the seminar, a lead in this discussion within the lecture theatre, to be able to help the person next to you understand it, because that will help you. More support and more drop-ins. Now, this is within the do better with less, because I don't think it's that hard to do support for people. More drop-in sessions, more tutorials. Give your time over, instead of having to write lectures and to deliver seminars, give your time over to answering questions. One of the ways that I've done this recently this year, due to the COVID lockdown, was that I took in lots of questions and then did Q&As with the students, video recorded, and they found it really useful. Instead of me delivering content that I wanted to deliver or thought they needed, I asked them for questions about any of the content and other issues, and then delivered a Q&A, which they could look at, save to their computer, look at again another time. So more support. I often will finish teaching with, what did I do this year? Maybe 7 or 8 weeks left of the module. I'm doing a whole year of teaching, but 7 or 8 weeks left to be able to just give essay support. And I think that that is a good way of saving some of your time responding to the students' needs. And also, when you're doing support, don't be afraid to support the basics. Again, I mainly teach third years, and I still help them with planning. I help them with planning at the beginning of the year with all of their course, and then and also the dissertation and how that fits into things. But as we move through, I help them plan what a week might look like. How do you get these things that you've got to get done over a week done? We might expect that students have nailed that by then, but sometimes they haven't. And even the ones who have done some element of planning and have got better, have got good at it, can still get better. Obviously, this is a really important skill for employability as well. But also support on writing a sentence, writing sections, writing paragraphs, and essay development. Real going back to the basics. I've found students, especially in that I had to learn to write academically quite late on, so I have a different take on these sort of things. So when I deliver some of this stuff, the students it's quite novel to the students. Everyone will have their own take on some of these basics. So don't assume that just because it's apparently been covered in the tutorial system that it's done. You can give your own spin on it, especially if it's your own module and you're going to require some specific elements of their assessment. Don't be afraid to go back over some of the basics with them. Okay, so that's the do better with less, do more with less. Take a bit of pressure off yourself, expect more from them, ask them to read more and come ready to class to discuss it. Ask them what they want to know from you. Ask them what support they require and give them that, instead of constantly trying to bang more content into sessions. Okay, next one. This is quite important, I think, with all the COVID stuff. And the reason I'm doing this now for the COVID stuff is a lot of people are having to think about how they're going to reteach things and do things differently. And these kind of fundamental ways of thinking about things sit underneath those ways that we're going to be redeveloping modules with this new hybrid teaching that we're going to be doing in the next academic year. But anyway, technology. Using technology should only enhance things. I see a lot of fetishism of technology. Oh, this is the new thing. And I see staff drawn to doing the new thing, to figure out the new thing, but not necessarily doing the basics right. I've seen staff who spend a lot of time figuring out a new way of presenting something to students, but not do a lecture in a really simple, clear way. So we have to get the basics in place. Once the basics are in place, technology can come in and enhance that. But it definitely can't replace the basics of lecturing. Yes, we're going to have to move to a kind of an online system, but the basics of lecturing will still count within that lecture, that online lecture. A start, a middle, and an end. A coherent story, the stuff that I've talked about in terms of internal consistency within the lecture. All of that is what will still matter rather than the technology. Things whizzing around all over the page like they do on Prezi, which I've used in the past, but I pulled myself away from it because it was technology was getting ahead of me and I wasn't just doing a simple basic lecture. All of that stuff has to evaporate. Solid basic lectures have to be there, and the technology can help on top of that. I also think that the technology cannot replace, in a fundamental sense, the face-to-face contact. It's really important that we try and maintain some level of, it's probably going to be socially distanced at the minute, but some level of face-to-face contact. But in some ways it can be better than face-to-face contact. I've already given one example, which I found really useful. Doing Q&As and tutorials, by doing them online, the students asking me questions, they can record them if they want, and ask you questions verbally, or they can just ask them in an email in a written format. By you recording that and sending it to them, they've got it to hold on to. One of the things that I've realized this year is that when I do tutorials with people, the things that I say, which I assume they've got, even if they've noted them down, haven't necessarily gone in. Whereas in a video, I can double down on things. I can say things twice to make sure they've taken a note. I can tell them to stop the video, write this down. Or I can say, here's action point 1, do that, and then come back to the video. I can make sure that they do those things with the video, they can stop them. Whereas a face-to-face interaction, a lot of the value that you give them, it evaporates, it disappears. The student might be nodding and agreeing and understand it, and then walk out the room and it's gone. So technology, really assess if the technology is doing what it should be doing, which is making everything better. Shouldn't be making things worse. This is a problem at university and life more broadly. Okay, last couple. Set out the to and fro. Now, everyone knows, most people will be aware of the importance of setting out what the module looks like, what your expectations are. Setting out how they can get hold of you and all that sort of stuff. Good, that's all got to be done. But at the same time, setting out the to and fro, setting out that this is you and then them, you and then them. You give them something, they give you something. You give something, they give something. And this to and fro process is, one, how the module gets a life of its own and starts to develop and they get more out of it. 2, once they get down to the nitty gritty of the module towards the end, when they're doing their piece of work or they're revising for their exam, the more they put in, the more they can come back and start asking you more refined questions. So setting out that to and fro, that it's a partnership, that you might be leading it. Maybe they're like interns. That's one way to think about it. They're doing an internship in thinking about your academic ideas with you. But the intern has to do some work. They have to learn so that they can ask questions back of you. I think that's a really important one, that it's to and fro, this sort of teaching. Most people will have student surveys, feedback at the end of the module, formal process. I tend to have a midway informal process where I ask the students for advice about what can be done to make the module better. The way that I structure this actually is around the module feedback we give them. So our forms are based on a 1 to 5, 5 being good, 1 being bad. And I say to them, if there's anything that you wouldn't give me a 5 for, I want to know. So if there's anything that you think this is a 3 or this is a 4 or God forbid this is a 1, I want you to tick that form and I want you to tell me what I need to do about it to make it a 5. What that means is that I can then deliver those things. I can do the you said I did. I can ensure that by the end of the module, I've managed all those things. Maybe they want more content. Maybe they want me to shut up and do more seminars. Maybe they want more videos, whatever. I can try and manage it and mitigate it. I can try and give them what they want, or I can do a decent job of pushing back and saying, well, here's why this isn't happening this way. You can't have that practical because you've got it in this module. And then you can help them to understand why things are delivered in that way, or deliver it in the way that they want. Then that comes to the end of the module. Hopefully the student survey and satisfaction will be quite good. It's one of the reasons I get good feedback is because of that process. But it's part of this to and fro. They get to say 4, 5, 8, 10 weeks in what they want, how things can be better, what they need from you to do what they want to do, to learn what they want to learn, to succeed in the ways they want to succeed. Then the final one, connected to this, it could be its own point, I'm not sure, is empowering the students as much as possible. An easy one for us anyway, I don't know, it's different for different staff, but an easy one is submission dates. Week 1, I asked them to have a look at what their other submission dates are that have usually been picked for them. If it's an exam, they usually know when the exam period is going to be. Right, well, where do you want to hand my work in? Because I can be flexible because it's an essay. We can do it here, but you'll get less support. We can do it there, you'll be closer to exams. So an element of empowering. Obviously, we can do this with content. What do you want to hear about? What do you want me to teach about? Within reasons, I'll try and do it. And then with the assessment, I always encourage the students to write about something they're interested in, but also something that they know they will be able to, also something that they can try and use in the future to try and get a job. So are they interested in sports development? It's one that we often teach. Okay, well, let's see how that works. What can you do in that area? Or if it's just enjoyment, are you interested in globalization? I don't think I've ever heard anybody interested in globalization. Here we go. Well, let's do a topic on that and try and encourage the assessment to be able to be delivered in a way that they can do something that they find interesting. Super simple. It's low-hanging fruit, really, isn't it? Back to the first thing. Okay. Hope that's been useful. Some of it will have been, hopefully, some of it won't have been. Some you'll already be doing. Some it might make you think, okay, I might do that. Hopefully that's the case. I'm always happy to discuss any of this sort of stuff. I love talking about this sort of stuff. So if you have any comments, questions, just drop me a note. I'll be happy to get on the phone and chat with you about module development or any of this other stuff. And one other plug, I should plug the Teaching with Sociological Imagination in Higher Education, which is a book that I did with Alex Channon and Ursula Edgington, where we cover a lot of this stuff in a more formal way. So you should have a look at that as well. Should have the book with me, really. It's over there. There we go. All right. Nice to see you all virtually. See you again.